Greetings, my friends. We are all interested in the Plan 9 by 9 podcast, for that is where you and I are going to spend the next hour of our lives. And remember, my friends, podcasts such as these are made possible by listeners like these. Jamie Lawson and Joe Medina of Olean Productions, Eric Miles, Christopher R. Mim, Eric Margaret, and of course, Bayou Hunter. Let us punish the guilty, let us reward the innocent. My friends, can your hearts stand the Plan 9 by 9 podcast?
For the first time, we are bringing to you the full story of what happened.
What plan will you follow now?
Plan 9. It's been absolutely impossible to work through these Earth creatures. Their soul is too controlled.
Why do I always get hooked up with these spook details? Monsters, graves, bodies.
Oh, all right.
Well, it was covered up by the higher echelon.
I am a soldier of our planet. We did not come here as enemies. We came only with friendly intentions, to talk, to ask your aid for the whole universe. But your governments of Earth refused even to accept our existence.
Flying saucers, Captain, are still a rumor.
Now toddle off and fly your flying machine, darling. But if you see any more flying saucers, will you tell them to pick another house to buzz?
Minutes later, the police arrived at the scene.
Who found them?
The man and girl. The morgue wagon ought to be along most any time.
You get their statement?
Yeah, they're pretty scared.
Finding a mess like this ought to make anyone frightened.
You believe there are such things as flying saucers, Colonel?
Tell you one thing, if a little green man pops out of me, I'm shooting first and asking questions later.
You realize there's a government directive stating that there is no such thing as a flying saucer.
You're a headstrong young man.
Those incidents in the graveyard these past few days just got me worried.
Don't like hearing noises, especially when there ain't supposed to be any. Yeah, sort of spooky-like.
Shall we talk now or wait?
Go ahead, my friend.
We are moving right along here into the movie Plan 9 from Outer Space, and this time around we have a mega fan of the film with us here. You might have heard him recently on Monster Kid Radio. You've heard him on Drunken Zombie when that was a podcast back in the day, and you might even see him on TV because he's a horror host. Scott Morris and I are joined by Lord Blood-Rah. How you doing, sir?
Oh, my lords and ladies, I'm doing fine, and I'm honored to be on this podcast talking about one of the films that, well, made me, for better or worse, who I am.
Oh, boy.
Oh, yes. This movie's had a deep influence on me.
This will be a lot of fun to talk about with you because I know you're a huge fan. And obviously, I mean, I'm a fan. Scott, I think I speak for you, too. You're a fan.
I've watched it once or twice.
Yeah, once or twice. Nah, it's okay.
Maybe 9.
Yeah.
Oh. Well, we have minutes 9 through 18 to talk about what we call Plan 2 of the Plan 9 by 9 podcast. And we're going to get into that, but we have a question for you, sir, before we get into things.
We would like to know what you think one of the first plans 1 through 8 would have been, that the aliens would have used to take over the world.
Oh, interesting. Well, let's see. Plan 9 was resurrecting the dead.
Yes.
To come back and take over the planet. I would say that maybe around Plan 3 or 4 would have been giving sentience to squirrels. I think that they abducted some squirrels, did some genetic engineering on them, and made them sentient in hopes that they would turn against the human race and take over the world in the aliens' name. And all they did was just find better ways and better storage facilities for their nuts. So it didn't work out for them. So they had to move on to another plan.
And to quote the famous flying squirrel, that trick never works.
There you go. Hey, we found a Rocky the Squirrel and Plan 9 link. We found it.
Oh, wow. That's just magical.
That explains Rocket J. Squirrel. There you go.
I have a small history of linking Plan 9 with other things as as Derek could attend to on a recent, as of this recording, episode of my Disney Indiana podcast. I drew a line between Plan 9 and Captain Marvel.
Oh. All right. I haven't seen Captain Marvel yet, but I'll be on the lookout for any possible links.
Yep, Derek actually lent his voice to the Disney Indiana podcast in our intro.
Oh, nice.
Playing a Plan 9 character. I'll just say that much.
All right. Okay. Very good.
That was fun. What number episode was that, Scott? So listeners can go check it out. You remember?
I can look it up real quick.
Hey, it's your podcast, buddy.
I know it's my podcast, and it was episode number 280, subtitled Higher, Further, Faster.
Okay. All right. Wow. So, is it possible that Plan 9 is the center of all things? Are we establishing that?
Maybe to me, yes.
It's Scott's unified Plan 9-iverse theory.
Yes. There you go.
Now, don't get too excited, but the idea of Plan 9 from outer space having connections to other films, or specifically imagining that Plan 9 from outer space could be connected to another public domain film, well, that's something that we do bring up in a future episode of Plan 9 by 9, so keep listening. Scott asked you a question. Now, I have a question for you, sir.
Yes.
When was the first time you saw Plan 9 from outer space?
Oh, wow. I want to say, like, as with most horror and sci-fi films, it was probably on Bob Wilkins' Creature Features. I think, I don't really know. I would say that it was either on Bob Wilkins' Creature Features back in the 70s, or it was just some other, maybe mid-afternoon horror show that just featured it, and it came on, and I was mesmerized by it. I can't really think. I can't think back that far. It feels like Plan 9 has always been with me. It's one of those things that implants itself in your consciousness, and you can't think of a time before having seen it. So, but that was probably with Bob Wilkins' Creature Features, I would say.
I think sometimes the best movies are like that, though. They become part of who you are. Like, I couldn't tell you the first time I saw A Creature from the Black Lagoon. I mean, that's my favorite film. I just don't know. I don't know who I was before that. Did I exist before I saw that film? I don't know.
Oh, that's right. Yeah, that's the way I feel about it. Yeah.
Well, let's talk a little bit about what we saw in this sequence here, just to kind of synopsize real quick. We actually get to see one of the best characters in this entire thing, Inspector Daniel Clay, hopping into action. We saw him at the very end of the first section here as he was getting into the police car, but we actually get him full force here, and he gets into the car because they're going to race off to the cemetery.
Right.
The car that they get into, if my research is correct, is a 1954 Ford main lane 4-door sedan.
I'll buy it. Sure.
Well, he gets into the car at night. How far away is this police station from?
Yeah. They say in minutes later.
Yes.
And apparently they've been driving for an entire day because,
yes.
He actually gets in the passenger seat. So he gets in dead of night, drives throughout the day, and gets to the cemetery on the following night, it seems, in a different car.
Yes, the different car is, again, if my research is correct, a 1957 Ford Custom 300. Also, at some point, he switched. He's now in the back seat on the driver's side and wearing a trench coat.
Oh, my God. I see those things I didn't notice. Wow. Neither did Ed, apparently. Yeah.
What was the trench coat, though? Wasn't that Lieutenant Harper?
Who knows? Was it in that car?
Yeah, I believe so, because he walks up. He walks up with Clay.
Okay. I guess we'll just have to go back and watch that section again.
Yeah.
Darn.
I actually have it on a loop playing as we're talking. Yes.
There you go.
Well, either way, it's a different car.
Yes, it's definitely a different car.
They didn't even bother to put the same license plate on the car. I mean, there's no license plate on the front of the car that we see in that daytime sequence. But then we get back to the cemetery and it's nighttime again.
Yep.
And had no time for continuity.
Well, when we get to the cemetery, the reason they were called to the cemetery is because some bodies were found earlier. There are a couple of bodies here, and the people are all shooken up, and one of my favorite lines is uttered there.
The morgue wagon ought to be along most any time.
The idea of calling it a morgue wagon is just stuck with me ever since I saw this film.
Yes. Yes. The morgue wagon. I'm sure that's the professional term for it.
And it comes up again. They don't just say it the one time. More than once do they call it a morgue wagon.
Yeah.
I also like actually hearing Clay talk, because I can't think of too often that we hear Tor Johnson speak in a lot of these movies.
That's right. That's right.
Actually getting to hear him talk, and his line after he's been told that, did you get the witnesses' statements? And the patrolman says something like, yeah, they're pretty scared. And him saying,
finding a mess like this ought to make anyone frightened. Have one of the boys take the guy and the girl back to town. You take shots.
And this may be why we don't normally hear him speak in most films. His accent's very thick. It's a character thing. It's a moment for him, but wow. Right. Especially when he tells Lieutenant Harper that I'm a big boy now, Johnny.
I'm a big boy now, Johnny. Yeah.
Wow.
That's right. Yeah. Tor Johnson. He had a pretty good film career as extras in a lot of films, small bits, mostly gangster henchmen, that kind of thing, and monsters in a couple of films. But he was better known as the Swedish Angel, a wrestler, and was quite a popular wrestler back in the day. And his big trick was he always had that massive bald head. He would take razor blades and put them between his fingers and lightly score the top of his head just enough to draw blood and then ice it down so that it would close up. So when he got in the ring, whenever his head would go into the turnbuckle or into the mat, those would open up and he would start bleeding. And if the sight of his own blood would send him into a rage, and he would win the match because he was so enraged that he was bleeding. Can you imagine the sight of giant Tor Johnson in the middle of a wrestling ring, blood pouring down his head in a rage? That's amazing.
Wow.
That would have been an incredible sight to see.
I'm a fan of pro wrestling. I mean, I think I've talked about this a little bit on other podcasts, and I would love to see, but I don't know if there's any tapes that exist of him actually performing in the ring. That sounds terrifying.
It does. Oh, it does. Oh, yeah. Yeah, there's got to be footage out there.
There's got to be somewhere.
Yeah.
I'm looking over his filmography, and a few times he appears as a character called the Swedish Angel, so I'm assuming he's playing himself, and maybe we do get to see some in-ring action with him. I doubt he's cutting himself up in a movie that came out in 1948, but still.
No. Right, yeah.
My history with him outside of Ed Wood films, I can only think of one place I've ever seen him, and it's in an Abbott and Costello film.
Ah!
He's in Abbott and Costello in the Foreign Legion.
Sure.
Wow.
So,
right.
90 degrees from most of the times you see him in the type of movie there.
Well, Scott, you mean you've never seen The Beast of Yucca Flats?
Oh, I blocked that one. I have seen that on Mystery Science Theater 3000.
Good man. Yeah.
I forgot. Yeah. Oh.
Listen to you. I forgot.
It's more like I blocked it. Yeah.
Yeah. Well, Right. I actually really like him in The Black Sleep, where he gets to perform with like Lugosi again, and then John Carradine and Lon Chaney. It's just cool to kind of see him mixing it up with some of these other legends.
Yeah. What a cast in that movie. Yeah.
It's an interesting mix of personalities, but I mean, you can't think Tor Johnson without thinking Plan 9. And how many times did he work with Ed Wood? 3 or 4 times, didn't he?
I believe so.
Yeah. This one, Bride of the Monster and Night of the Ghouls, I believe that it's only those 3. Yeah, which form kind of a weird trilogy, actually, because they take place in the same town, near the same cemetery, talking about the same house. Kind of. It's strange. It's Ed Wood's trilogy,
It's a weird little, again, there's the Ed Wood Plan 9-iverse.
That's right.
There's this shared universe, the cinematic shared universe of Ed Wood. That's a research paper somebody should write.
Or the Tor Johnson-verse.
Oh, even better.
Ooh, the Tor Johnson-verse, yes.
All right, so the reason he says I'm a big boy now, Johnny, is because Inspector Clay is going to go investigate on his own for some reason or other. I can't imagine this is standard operating procedure for the police department, but whatever. Inspector Clay, who's a big boy, is going to go off on his own and explore the spooky cemetery while the rest of his men are dealing with the morgue wagon and the witnesses and what's going on there. And, we get to spend some time with Tor in a cemetery, and that's kind of fun. I mean, it's the cemetery that people make fun of because it looks kind of cheap. It's on a set. But, I mean, I just would have loved to have hung out there.
Oh yeah, definitely. To be on that and to picture it as this really kind of dinky soundstage where the black of the sky is literally like 3 feet behind them. These cardboard tombstones that fall over with great regularity. Yeah.
I just like all the smoke that they've got going in there. And you know that had to have been toxic, whatever it was they were burning to make that happen. You know they did, yeah.
Yeah, back in the day, fog machines, I'm sure, were just, horrific affairs. Yeah.
At one point, the police officers comment on there being a funny odor.
Yes.
Does that come up anywhere else?
I think 1 or 2 other places.
Okay.
Oh, well, here's maybe another place where Plan 9 breaks ground. Can you think of another kind of quote-unquote zombie movie, which this kind of is, where they reference the smell of the zombies before this? I can't think of one.
Scott, can you think of anything? I can't. I'm drawing a blank.
No, I'm not thinking. I've got the script up here in front of me, and I was doing some searches for the word odor or smell to see if it was actually showed up in the script at any other times.
And does it?
I just had started it, so I don't know yet.
Okay.
I know Bela didn't reference it in White Zombie, so.
Right. Yeah, that's true. That's true. Well, in those films, well, I guess they were still corpses. They were still dead.
Yeah.
Huh.
Yeah.
Well, either way, while Scott's looking through the script, let's move on. We get to Paul and Jeff. I love this couple in this film. They are hanging out on their patio area, and Jeff seems distracted, or as Paula puts it, you seem to be up there somewhere.
Yes.
He's troubled because he saw the flying saucers and he was banned by the big army brass from telling anybody about it, but he goes ahead and tells his wife anyway. The big army brass is mentioned a couple of times here, and this is actually something that was brought up in our previous episode and comes up again while we go through the film with other guests as well during other sections of the film. There does seem to be this kind of government doesn't want to talk about it, wants to shut it down. This is all a big conspiracy kind of through line through this film that I never really picked up on until we started talking about this movie for this podcast.
Well, I think the way that we're watching it in chunks, and Derek and I are actually kind of watching it out of order as well as trying to get scheduled with some of our guests and hearing other people's thoughts, that idea keeps coming up, and it really impresses me, and it's something that I've never seen before either, but it is definitely there.
It's fascinating to me.
Yes.
Oh, yeah, that is interesting.
Well, they both see a flying saucer together as they're chatting, and he's telling his wife about it. You hear the sound, you see the lights, and you see Paula throw herself into a patio chair. As if they don't want to be one-upped by Paula throwing herself into a patio chair, we go back to the cemetery.
Oh, I know where you're going.
We see the sound and the light. And the lab folks from the morgue are carrying a body on a stretcher. And as soon as they see the lights, they just chuck that thing as hard as they can right off screen. And it's like, come on.
I don't know, why did Ed feel that he needed that shot of the body tumbling over the, he didn't do any retakes when tombstones fall over or anything like that, but the body, he needed that shot of the body falling out of the stretcher.
Well, I guess he needed the payoff for that amazing pitch that those 2 lab techs give that corpse. It's just nuts. If you watch that section just by itself, it's like, I understand being scared and spooked and like dropping everything, but they wind up and give it a good heave-ho. It's great.
Oh, yeah. Yeah, they just dump him. Yeah. Oh my God, I just watched it again. That is hilarious. Yeah, he may as well have been on a trampoline. That's amazing. Wow.
Is that where you thought I was going, Scott?
Oh, yeah, definitely, because I wanted to make that point, too. I could not believe the distance that they get of one of the grave diggers. That's the bodies, is the 2 grave diggers from the first plan that we covered. And that's just amazing how far he goes.
Oh, that is hilarious. Oh, Ed, we love you.
Now, I don't have the time code here in front of me, but it's during this sequence that we see a new character, kind of, sort of, in this film, at least a new actor. Yeah. We get introduced to Fake Bela.
That's right.
We get the first appearance of Fake Bela, played by not Bela Lugosi.
Not by a long shot, no.
Yeah, the standard rumor is it's Bela Lugosi's wife's chiropractor.
I thought it was Ed Wood's wife.
Or Ed Wood's wife. It's one, yeah, something like that. It's a chiropractor, basically.
Right, yeah. And supposedly Ed thought that he looked like Bela in profile. So that was enough to have him double Bela, even though he was like easily a foot and a half taller than Bela.
Easily, yeah.
The man's name is Tom Mason, and he was not really known as an actor. He appeared in one other film, according to his filmography, again for Ed Wood and Night of the Ghouls. But other than that, there's nothing.
A short, sweet career.
Such a shame, since he, made such an impression in this film.
Oh yeah, that's right. Yeah, the way he held that cape over his face. Yeah,
I mean,
who else could do that?
Right?
I sure hope he was a better chiropractor. I'll say that much.
Yes, exactly. We hope he made his fortune in being a chiropractor. Yeah.
There you go.
We get another look at the mother of all horror hosts, Vampira, Mila Nurmi, in also one of the most iconic images in this movie.
And as a horror host, I mean, you just called her, the mother of all horror hosts. I mean, she is probably one of the most important horror hosts, period, for what she did and how she kind of broke new ground. But she wasn't necessarily the first, was she?
There are rumors that somebody preceded her by maybe a year or so, but I've never heard a name or seen an image attached to that. She was actually a horror host in LA before the Shock Theater package came out, which began the entire horror host kind of craze in the United States in, I want to say 56, 57. Vampira started in 54. She actually precedes the big boom. And for all intents and purposes, she was the very first horror host on television.
Okay. This is the second of only 2 interruptions we have in this episode of Plan 9 by 9. I wanted to cut in here, and I suspect most of you already know what the Shock Theater package was. But for those of you who might not know, the Shock Theater package was put together by Screen Gems, which was a subsidiary of Columbia Pictures. For whatever reason, they were releasing a package of Universal films to various TV stations across the country. The package included 52 movies, and most of them were the iconic horror films that we associate with Universal. You had The Wolfman, Dracula, Frankenstein, all of that. But then you also had some other films that are of the genre, like The Black Cat or The Invisible Ray, and then some movies that had absolutely nothing to do with horror, but were still kind of dark or maybe film noir-ish or crime-like, movies like 1942's Sealed Lips, or even 1928's The Last Warning. Now, I suspect that the release of the Shock Theater package, and then later on there was the Son of Shock Theater package that pretty much picked up the rest of what Universal had to offer, the various House movies, House of Dracula, House of Frankenstein, the one Invisible Man film that was not included in the original Shock Theater package, as well as the remaining Ape Woman film and a few others. I think it's pretty easy to say that if not for the Shock Theater package being made available, we wouldn't have the horror host, I'm going to call it an industry, maybe it's a movement, as we know it today.
Don't get me started on horror host history, but yeah, she's the very first horror host on television. Yeah.
Okay. She did some acting, but her claim to fame obviously was as Vampira. Over the years, she did appear in other things as well. I don't know much about her personal history.
She, I believe, started out as a model and then went into acting. The legend is she was seen at a Halloween party dressed up as the Charles Addams female character that we've come to know as Morticia Addams. So she was wearing the tight black dress, slinky dress, more or less looking like Vampira. A producer saw her and got the idea of having her present creepy films on the station in Southern California. That's how she was born. So legend has it. There's probably a lot more to it, but that's the legend.
When Tracy and I were in Hollywood late last year, we went to the Hollywood Museum, and while we were there, they had the costume that Lisa Marie wore as Vampira in the Ed Wood film.
Very cool.
Awesome.
Yeah.
Speaking of Vampira, we do see her and Fake Bella take down Inspector Clay somehow.
Yeah.
Well, he shoots at both of them. And of course, that doesn't work. So he's got no defense. I guess he doesn't decide to hand combat either of them.
Well, he didn't bleed. He didn't get enraged by the sight of his own blood. Is the problem?
There you go. Yeah. Fake Bale is a chiropractor, so he probably knew exactly where to hit him to kind of help.
Well, the other police officers, they hear the gunshots and they go and find out what's happened, and Inspector Clay is dead. He looks like all the other bodies, which apparently look like they were torn up by bobcats. That was mentioned earlier. Mm-hmm. And the lieutenant, again, this section's got so many of my favorite lines. Inspector Clay's dead, murdered.
And somebody's responsible.
Well, I guess you're in charge now, Lieutenant.
Right. Oh, which leads to the lieutenant's amazing gun handling.
Oh boy.
Oh my God. It is. I posted Plan 9 from Outer Space on my TV show, and I directly stole a joke from a DVD called Plan 9.2 from Outer Space. And it's a parody. Actually, it's a puppet show parody of Plan 9, made by Ernie Fasalius, the filmmaker behind Hardware Wars. I recommend, if you can find it, I know it's still out there, see it. But he does this joke where every time he points at someone with the gun goes off. Every single time, as it would. He's using the gun like a pointer, pointing at the cop, pointing at the sky, and I did that in my show as well. Every time he points the gun, I inserted a gunshot. And
well, I love, like, he scratches his shoulder, pushes his hat back, all this weird stuff.
Yeah, it's amazing. It's like any cop who handled a gun like that would have been knocked off the force or shot himself in the head by now, or
exactly
by now, self-inflicted gunshot wound.
So that's Plan 9.1 from Outer Space, and I have seen it.
God.
And it's a riot. It's just a riot. They make jokes not just about Plan 9, but there are a few other things. Like there's a Glenn or Glenda joke made in there as well. It's a fun little short. But yeah, I mean, every time he moves that gun around, you're like, "Whoa, duck! Whoa, wait, what are you doing?" And tilting his hat up with the gun. That seals it for me. Like, come on.
That is so fun to see. Yeah, I've presented this movie live too, and there's always kind of a building laughter throughout that scene. But what's he doing with that gun? Why is he pointing the gun at everybody? And then by the end of that scene, people are just uproariously laughing and relieved no one's been shot.
We're about to make it out of this section of the movie without anybody being shot.
Yeah.
I wanted to say before we leave the discovery of Clay's body, this is an area that has one of the changes that was made by Legend Films when they colorized the film. At the time, they ran some eBay auctions that if you were the high bidder, there was a couple scenes that they had targeted that you got to change, and this is one of them. In the original film where Clay's body is laying, there is a grave marker next to him that's blank. There's no names on it whatsoever. And so if you were the high bidder, they would put your name or whatever you wanted on the gravestone when they colorized it.
Oh!
So in the Legend film at the 1538 mark, when you see the tombstone, the names Paula and Russell are on that gravestone, and it's only in the Legends release of this film.
Oh, very interesting. Yeah, I see it.
I think it's in the next session that we've already recorded, maybe, or there's another one coming up where Paula is in her bedroom, and there's some pictures in a line over the bed. And the middle one, if you were the high bidder on another auction, you could have another picture put in there. So there's two big differences and with the Legend films, and we saw one of them in this section.
Oh, very good.
And because we're recording this out of order, I, at this point, know that was the case. But when we recorded the other section that does have that little extra bit in there, I didn't realize it was something that was added by Legend Films because that was the version of the film I had watched for this. And so I sound like an idiot. So thanks again, Scott.
Yeah, I forgot. The Legends actually made 3 different changes. The picture one is at the 30:47 mark that we'll get to. And then near the end of the film, when we're all into the saucer and Trent punches out or slaps or whatever Eros, they for like 2 or 3 frames, his face turns bright green. So, like, if you get hit, it makes an alien turn green, and that's at the 107:11 mark of the Legends film release.
Oh, interesting.
Okay.
Cool. Very cool.
Well, after we've been told that somebody's responsible because somebody's been murdered, we're pretty much towards the end of this clip. We see the flying saucers flying over the CBS station and the NBC station, and we see the iconic newspaper with the headline, "Saucer Seen Over Hollywood."
Right. Yeah. That's right.
Well, you're missing the iconic scene to me. There's a shot of a car with a whole bunch of people in it, and they're all pointing out the window to the spaceships, and it looks like they're pointing in different directions. It's one of the scenes that always makes me laugh when I see it. It's featured in the Sci-Fi Dine-In at Disney's Hollywood Studios, and they have some scenes from Plan 9. That's one of the big ones that they have because it shows the spaceships and everything. And like I said earlier, Tracy and I went to Hollywood last year. In my mind, I was trying to figure out how I could have us do that, but it was just the two of us, and I needed somebody that would be outside the car taking the picture, and I never could figure that out. But I wanted to do that in Hollywood.
There you go. That would have been
That's
great.
awesome. That's awesome. Well, there's more than one flying saucer. They're just pointing at different ones, right?
Right.
Sure. That's what Ed was thinking. I'm sure. Yeah.
I'm sure if he was thinking.
Have you talked about the flying saucers themselves in previous segments?
I think we've talked briefly about them, not necessarily too in depth. I don't think, Scott, did we?
No, not too in depth.
The legend, and the legend is, obviously wrong when you look at the film, was that they were pie plates stapled together, spray painted silver. That's alluded to in the movie Ed Wood. In one scene, you see them like painting these pie pans silver and putting strings through them. They were actually commercially available model kits made by the Lindbergh Company, Lindbergh Plastics, I believe. And it was just called the Flying Saucer. The original model kit, and they probably got back in the day for, 98 cents a piece, if that, something like that. There were just little small UFOs with a little alien sitting inside of them. And the models were fairly detailed, pretty nice, but, looks like Ed just spray painted the whole thing silver and called it a day, which is what he did. But, yeah, there were commercial model kits that are still available. I think that somebody else has bought the mold for them and has recreated them now. You can own your own Plan 9 UFO, folks.
I think I do mention this in another recording here, but there is a company, a website, Cult TV Man, over at culttvman.com, that mentioned that Polar Lights and Round 2 are the companies behind re-releasing the Plan 9 from Outer Space Flying Saucer kit. As of this recording, and I don't know when it's going to go into actual order, it's only available for pre-order right now for $21.95. So there you go. If you want to get your own Plan 9 from Outer Space Flying Saucer kit, that's what you do. You head over there and buy a whole bunch of them and then make your own unauthorized, or I guess it doesn't even need to be unauthorized because it's in the public domain, a sequel to Plan 9 using these flying saucers.
There you go. Yeah, I like that.
Or remake it or whatever. Or just decorate your Christmas tree with them. Whatever. Just get yourself a bunch of flying saucers from Plan 9.
Because everybody needs those.
Yeah.
That's right. Of course.
Well, that's pretty much this section. What an interesting little bit of police work.
Yeah, I mean, they pretty much have absolutely nothing to go on. These bodies, supposedly torn apart by bobcats, look perfectly intact when you look at them. I guess they couldn't, they felt that saying they looked like they were torn apart was enough gore for this film. Or Ed probably just didn't have the time for gore in this movie.
Yeah.
Well, I think the bodies, aren't they like face down so you can't really tell? When I first saw this film as a little kid, the cop that says look like they've been torn up by bobcats, at the same time he picks up one of the shovels. So I'm looking at the shovel. Is there a whole bunch of claw marks on the... Is it the shovel that looked like it was torn up by bobcats? I was so confused.
See, even as a kid, you were trying to overlay logic onto an
exactly.
I will make this movie make sense, one way or the other.
That's right. Well, I have a theory about Ed Wood and the way he wrote scripts and the movies and the way they turned out. Ed Wood was in the Army. When he came out of the Army, he was looking for a job. It turns out that he was the fastest typist in New York State, I want to say in the late 40s. Oh. He won an award for being a lightning fast typist, incredibly fast typist. And when he wrote his scripts, he wrote them very fast and usually didn't do any rewrites. So my theory is that ideas came from his head, flowed out onto the typewritten paper without logic or thought ever entering the equation. I think that's why he has this kind of stream of consciousness kind of motif in his movies. It's just whatever he was thinking at the time, boom, that's what's happening. That's what's happening in the movie. And then he went out and filmed them.
I like that theory because I've always thought that he's had good ideas.
Yes.
The story for Plan 9, if you just look at it and don't think of the movie, you've got the Earth maybe getting too big for its britches, and so other aliens come down to try to stop them. I mean, it's the day the Earth stood still.
Mm-hmm.
It's an interesting idea. I believe that he could be a really good idea man, but if he had somebody that was a script doctor or somebody that could help him out, he could have been a lot more famous than he was.
I think you're right. I think your aliens bringing the dead back to take over the world. That's a great sci-fi horror premise. That's great. Yeah,
it really is. It really is. And I mean, not to downplay some of the other Ed Wood films, because I love a lot of them. Mm-hmm. This one seems to have the most high concept of all of them. I mean, aliens, undead walking around, all this stuff going on. The universe is in danger because of us stupid humans. There's some pretty big ideas here.
Oh, yeah. Absolutely. That's right.
I mean, Ed Wood was very prolific. He was called by his wife the fastest typist in the Marines as well. So, I mean, this wasn't just somebody said something somewhere. I mean, his wife backs up this story. And he banged out novels. He was writing screenplays. He was doing stage plays. And a lot of his dialogue, especially in his earlier films, I feel like feels like something that is suited better for the stage than the film. Just the way a lot of the information is delivered. It's just kind of spoken and issued out without really kind of getting into real conversations between people.
Yeah, I could see that. Yeah, I think you're right. Yeah, that's a good point.
They look like they've been torn up by bobcats. Oh, okay. And then you just kind of accept it and move on if you're watching a low-budget play of some sort. But in a film, we kind of want to see it.
That's right.
Especially in a horror movie or a science fiction movie of some sort. But yeah, he banged out his work quite a bit. And, we're still seeing a lot of his stuff being issued now. I have one of his books, Hollywood Rat Race, that I'm reading right now. And, there are collections of his short stories being released. I think I read something somewhere. I don't have all the details, but another collection of his short stories are being re-released at this point. So, he had literary aspirations as well as filmmaker aspirations. And if he could type pretty quickly, I get it,
Are these stories being re-released his kind of dime store porn stuff, which is what he made his living on towards the end of his life?
Some of it from what I understand, but like his first novel was about him being in the military, in the Marines. I mean, it was just,
The Casual Company, right? The
Casual Company. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, right.
The Casual Company actually was turned into a play, and then there we go. But yeah, I think Ed Wood, I think you're right. I mean, I feel like under just a few different circumstances, not really big, just a few changes here and there to what happened around him, he would have been a lot more successful.
I think that's true. I think that's true. Yeah, and it's a real shame that he never got even an inkling of the fame he would get later in his life. It's a real shame.
I think it's been kind of a through line through most of these episodes that we've recorded so far, and I'm sure we'll talk about it, Scott and I, when we wrap this thing up, that it's kind of a bummer. Well, I mean, the man is responsible for some of the most amazing, iconic films, not necessarily because, they're like The Day They Stood Still or Frankenstein or Dracula or any of those, but I mean, they have their place.
Oh, yeah, definitely. Yeah, this film above, especially, all of his films, but above any other film has been called the worst film ever made, and that's patently untrue. It's ridiculous to even consider this the worst film ever made, I think, because we wouldn't be talking about it and enjoying it to this day if it was.
I also think the fact that this one's in the public domain helps a little bit as well.
Oh, yes.
Because now horror hosts can show it. It can be shown on TV, on the internet. It can be distributed in so many different ways so freely. Not to take anything away from it, but I also think that's a little bit of the reason why Night of the Living Dead was so successful. and is so iconic because it's public domain. Anybody can do anything with it, and it got seen by so many more people because of that. I think Plan 9 is kind of in that same boat. And yes, I just compared Ed Wood to George Romero.
Hey, everything goes back to Plan 9.
Well, Derek, how would it feel to read a copy of one of the original scripts?
I would love to read one of the scripts. I would love to.
Well, you need to make a trip to Southern California to go to the Plan 9 Ale House.
What?
and see, Lord Blood-Rah is in California, so, okay, what's going on?
Yeah.
Now, I'm going to probably butcher the name of this town. It's Escondido?
Oh,
Escondido. There's a place called the Plan 9 Ale House. And Gregory Walcott was a friend of the people that put this together. And before he passed away, he donated an original copy of his script that he used. And they used it to wallpaper the men's room.
What?
What?
Oh, no.
No. Oh, wow.
So if you want to read parts of the script, there you go.
I don't know how I feel about this.
Yeah.
I never knew this until I was doing some research on Gregory Walcott, and there's an article in the New York Times from when he passed away, when he was 87 years old, and it talks in here about him donating that script to them. He said that he didn't want to be forever known as being part of that movie. He liked his part in it, but he worked on a movie for Steven Spielberg at one point and several other things, and he wanted to be known more for that. But so, yeah, he donated the script, and it's in the men's room.
Couldn't he have made photocopies and used that to wallpaper then?
Well, I don't know. It says an original copy, so I don't know if it was his actual one that he used, but it's there.
Okay.
Wow. I just pulled up the website for the Plan 9 Ale House, and if I ever make it out to that area, I've got to go there now. They have some menu items, the Plan 9 house-made root beer, the Plan 9 cold brew coffee, so sign me up. I'm there.
Yep. And it's plan9alehouse.com is the website if you guys are wanting to check it out yourself.
No, this is not sponsored.
But someplace I would like to go next time I'm in California.
And if you do, you got to take your camera into the men's room. Yeah, that sounded odd.
And just take pictures of the walls.
As conspicuously as possible. I like bathroom walls, that's all.
You don't get it. I'm a fan. What? No. What? Oh, man. That's awesome. Well, there you go. That's where one of the scripts ended up.
Now we should have put that as one of our stretch goals for the Kickstarter we had, so we could raise money to go and visit this place.
Well, is there anything else we want to talk about? Plan 9 from Outer Space, Ed Wood, Tor Johnson, this 9 minutes, bathroom walls, anything else we want to talk about?
I think we've pretty much examined this 9 minutes. Yeah, it looks good to me. We got Daniel Clay's death and his resurrection's coming up soon.
And it was a good follow-up from the first section because that one ended on that great cliffhanger of everybody running to the cop car, and now we got to see where the cop car was going.
Will Daniel Clay make it into the car?
And which car is it? Anyway,
which car is it?
And what time of day is it?
Yeah. So Lord Blood-Rah has a website. He has TV shows. LordBlood-Rah.com is where people can find Joan Blood-Rah. Blood and then RAH.com. I'll make sure there's a link in the show notes, of course, to this. And what are the TV stations you can find you on?
In the Peoria area, I'm on My 59, Saturday nights at 10 p.m. In Fort Wayne, Indiana, I'm on My TV Fort Wayne at 10 p.m. Saturday nights, I'm on North Bay TV here in Northern California, Tuesday nights at 10 p.m., and a whole bunch of other streaming and broadcast stations. The best thing to do is check out the TV schedules on LordBlood-Rah.com.
My in-laws live just outside of Fort Wayne.
Oh, really?
Yes.
Oh.
There's been times where we've been there over a weekend, and next time I'm going to have to see if I can find you on their television stations.
Great. Yeah, My TV Fort Wayne is the station. I don't know what cable station it is. Yeah, Saturday nights at 10 p.m.
Cool.
And if you have a Roku, there are a handful of excellent horror host channels, and you can find Lord Blood-Rah in there as well. And he's got a Facebook page, and again, all the links to all of this will be in the show notes over at plan9by9.com.
Yes, and may I also plug the horror convention that I'm one of the organizers of. It's called Creatures Con, and this year it's coming up July 7th at the San Ramon Marriott in San Ramon, California. It's the San Francisco Bay Area's only classic horror and sci-fi convention. And this year, we're thrilled to host the West Coast premiere of Joshua Kennedy's new film, House of the Gorgon. And Joshua Kennedy is going to be a guest at the convention, as well as the lovely Veronica Carlson. We're thrilled to have her on hand for the West Coast premiere. You can check out more details and guest lists and events and everything like that for Creatures Con at creaturescon.com.
And that ties in nicely here because Joshua Kennedy is a friend of the show and actually has provided the voice of Criswell when we needed Criswell to say something here on the podcast. Josh Kennedy is the man, and so are you, Lord Blood-Rah. Thank you for doing this.
Yes, thank you.
I'm thrilled. Always thrilled to do this kind of thing and, talk about one of my favorite movies ever made. Thank you very much for this opportunity. I appreciate it.